Hi, YouTube. Hi, YouTubers. Hi, all my viewers. Good morning, everyone. Uh, this is Erica from In the Company of Cards, and I wanted to be sure that I would have this video done by the time certain other events were starting to take place. So here we are. Before I start with what I wanted to do today, I just wanted to take a minute to um, express gratitude for the life and work of Cecile Richards, who has gone to her great reward to be with her mother, Anne, famous Anne Richards. Um, Cecile Richards did so much for women and for girls and for families ultimately. And, servant, well done. God bless and Godspeed and rest well. So I wanted to do a video today. I will pull cards at the end, but today is sort of a double day, we'll call it. And so I thought that I would just do some sort of different things that you're not used to. So the first thing that I thought I would do, since people say they like my voice, okay, is to tell a story. And then I wanted to read you a couple of things, and then I'm going to pull some cards for us. So the first story that I wanted to tell is personal. So my parents met in 1952. My father was white, as I've mentioned, and my mother was Black. And as you can imagine, 1952 was the Dark Ages in a lot of ways. They met in 52, they married in 54, and I was born in 56. So anytime you see a five in as that third letter, a third number in somebody's birth year, you know that they've been around and seen some things in relation to civil rights and race relations and all of that. So my father wanted to be an Episcopal priest. And so he went through all of the motions. He got his Master's of Divinity and did his chaplaincy work and did everything he needed to do and met my mother. And so one of the things that he knew he had to do was to introduce um, the bishop to my mother, or introduce my mother to the bishop. So he took her to meet the bishop. The bishop was polite. And then after the meeting, he said to my father, you are a young man on the come up. And, I've got a great parish all picked out for you in a Chicago suburb. That's where they were from, Chicago. And, and you'll have a great life as a parish priest. Um, However, if you marry that woman, I will make it my business to see that you are never ordained in the Episcopal Church. Well, needless to say, my parents got married anyway, and true to his word, my father was not ordained in the Episcopal Church. But the Methodists decided that they would show up the Episcopalians, not 100%, but they would go them one better. So they said to my father, the Methodists, "We'll ordain you, but you'll never work as a minister in a parish." So my father really wanted to get ordained. So he was ordained as a Methodist minister and then began working with drug addicts on the street. And he was so good at what he did that he got recruited by an organization called the East Harlem Protestant Parish. And by that time, all three of us kids were born. And so when I was 3 and my youngest brother was 3 months, and the one in the middle was, you know, a year old, I guess we were Irish triplets, except we weren't Irish. We got on a train and we came to New York. I remember the trip. I remember the Pullman porter and how kind he was, and the fact that there was a sleeper. It was a sleeper car, and I thought that was very cool. And we lived in New York. Eventually, my father founded a drug rehabilitation center, which was really the first of its kind. And it was a residential treatment center. So we lived there. And so it was a residential treatment center that had also an outpatient component. But we lived with, like, I would say 25 men, who rotated in and out. And then there were a whole bunch more that came in during the day. I was the only girl, there, and my mother was the only other woman, female. And it was an interesting way to grow up. I'll just say that. Meantime, I was going to a public school. And the public school that I went to was called PS 168. And I had a wonderful first grade teacher. Uh, and, and then, well, and then after that, things kind of went downhill. The school was largely Black and Puerto Rican, but yeah, the teachers were, of course, all white. And I wasn't learning anything. So my mother switched me to what she thought was a better public school. And there were a lot of white kids in that school. So that was unusual for me. I went there in the third grade. So she said, this is going to be better for you. It's academically a better school, and so you'll like it more. Well, what I noticed was that even though, as you can imagine, I was always the one going, ooh, 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 with my hand up, he never got called on. And I noticed that the Black kids in the class would sit in the back where they had been assigned to sit and goofed around. And they would say to me when I would go, ooh, 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 they would say, what are you doing? And I'd say, I'm trying to answer the question. And they would say, she's not going to call on you. And they were right. So I said to myself, okay, when in Rome, now mind you, I'm in the third grade, when in Rome. So I decided that I would just stop working. I wouldn't do my homework. I wouldn't raise my hand. I wouldn't ask questions. I wouldn't answer questions. I would just hang out with my Black friends in the back. But then time passed, and I thought, oh, Erica, this might not have been the best decision in the world for you to make because your mother's going to get the report card and there will be hell to pay. So, I mean, I was sweating bullets waiting for that report card to come. Sure that I would get all F's and be, given a bad deportment report, deportment being behavior. Well, the report card came and I got straight A's. Now, this saved me from my mother's wrath, of course, on the one hand. On the other hand, remember, I'm in the third grade. I'm 8 years old. I thought, wait a minute. I haven't done any work all term. And I get straight A's. This is not right. And then I really shut down. I got angry, is what I got. I was bored, I was angry, and disaffected. All right. Simultaneously, this is the early 60s, uh, New York's Tony, fancy, white glove private schools were all desegregating. They were under pressure to desegregate. So Kennedy had been killed, Johnson was in office, and he had done a lot of sweeping civil rights legislation, as you know. And so my mother took me to interview at this one school. Chapin is the name of the school. It's a uh, very well-known girls' school in New York. So I went for the interview, and at the end, it was fine. And at the end, they told my parents, well, one of my parents took me for the interview. My mother took me. My father picked me up. And the school, Chapin, said that they couldn't admit me because I had what they called a visiometric problem. since then, I have figured out what they meant was I didn't look right. In other words, they wanted to desegregate, but not with somebody who had two parents of different races. Because, I mean, obviously, how did I get here? Unless someone white, uh, got with someone black, YouTube, I'm trying to say it in the right way. And that was a bridge too far from them. So I didn't get admitted. Well, my mother told the story to some white friends of hers, and they were horrified. And they said, "Oh, uh, try the school where our daughters go." And so I applied to that school, and that was Nightingale Bamford. And the year was 1964. And I was on my best behavior, um, for that interview. They gave me lunch in between interviewing and testing and all of that. And I remember exactly what the lunch was. And most particularly, I remember what they had for dessert. It was chocolate cake. And I thought, that's my favorite thing in the world. But you know what? I'm not going to eat it because I want this school to understand I'm serious. I really want to go here. Now, why did I want to go here? Because the public schools that I had come from looked like prison cells. Prisons. They had not cells, but prisons. They had wire, mesh wire on the windows. Everything was dark and old and ugly. And this school was beautiful. There was polished wood. There were vases of flowers on the table. There was art on the walls. I was like, go to this school. So I did not eat the chocolate cake. I'm not saying that that's why I got in, but I did get in. So now it's going to be the first day of school. Now, mind you, remember what I said. I had kind of slacked off all of third grade, which means that when I went to this new school, I repeated third grade. That was fine. So my mother, uh, in the first morning of school, came in and got me ready, and she was combing my hair. So I assumed the position, and every person who's black and female knows what I mean. When you assume the position, it's between your mother's knees as she combs your hair. And my mother, as she combed my hair, because obviously it was not locked back then, but it was very long, this is what she said. Now, my mother was beautiful, a little crazy, but beautiful, and gave me my gift of word for words. So she said, as she pulled the comb through my hair, when your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. And I thought, what is she talking about? But I come from an era, remember, I'm born in 1956, where mothers often would say things to you in sort of metaphor, an allegory. And you were not supposed to say, what do you mean by that? No, you were supposed to understand that in the fullness of time, all would be revealed. So I knew better than to ask her what she meant, but I did say to myself, when your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. Does she understand we're going to school, not the zoo? And even if we were going to the zoo, why would my hand be in a lion's mouth? And lions don't play music, so what is she talking about? But like Mary, as the Bible says, like Mary, I didn't say anything and I pondered it in my heart. Well, uh, that school was, again, a beautiful place. The girls were very welcoming and very friendly. It was an all-girls school. The teachers, there were two types. There were Americans, and then there were the European women who'd come over after the war. The European women were wonderful to me. They saw that I was smart, they challenged me, they accepted nothing but my best, and so that's what I gave them. The American teachers, it was very clear, did not want me to be there any more than the parents of my classmates did. So I observed all of this, and comported myself well because I had been told in my interview that the rate at which Nightingale increased their minority population, I was told, was contingent on my performance. This was during my interview when I was in the third grade. The first time I was in the third grade. And I didn't know what contingent meant. Um, but the headmistress had said to me, you'll be integrating Nightingale. And I said, well, my mother told me that integration is more than one. So I think I'm desegregating Nightingale, not integrating it. And she looked at me long and hard, and then she stood up and stuck her hand out, and I shook her hand, and it sealed the deal that I was in the school. So a couple of years pass, and it's now April 4th, 1968. My father wasn't home, and my brothers and I were doing homework in our rooms, and my mother was cooking. All of a sudden, we hear this blood-curdling scream, and it was my mother. They killed him, she said. And then she ran to my parents' bedroom, slammed the door, and sobbed all night long. All night long, I'm pushing tissues under the door. I'm knocking on the door. I'm asking if I can bring her a glass of water, if there's anything that my brothers and I can do. I, she wouldn't answer us. She just cried. We went up to the front to see what she was talking about, and it was Martin Luther King. Now, of course, little black children that we were, we all knew who Martin Luther King is, but I'll get to that later. So um, I didn't know what to do. So I knew there were a couple of things I could do. One was that my youngest brother, his birthday was the next day. And I assumed that that would be forgotten in, the mix of everything. And so I told him he could go in my room and take anything that he wanted as my birthday present to him. So that was one thing I did. The other thing I did, we stayed up very late, my brothers and I, that night. And again, at this point, I am what? I'm 11. I'm 11 at this point. My brothers are 10 and 9. The youngest one's 8, about to be 9 the next day. And we looked out the window, and we lived in Harlem, as I said, in East Harlem, it was a very, very drug-ridden, crime-ridden area that we lived in. But it was dead quiet, eerie. And we talked about Dr. King. We talked about our father who had worked with Dr. King, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then we went to bed. And I woke up the next morning and went from my neighborhood to this fancy neighborhood where this school was. And I remember that I said to myself, what would Dr. King want me to do? I've desegregated the school. What would he want me to do? And I thought, to just keep doing what I'm doing, keep doing this hard thing, which is the thing that I can do for the cause. I can be a model student so that this school will give this opportunity to other little Black girls. I get off the bus and I'm walking towards the school. It was the Fifth Avenue bus. If you're a New Yorker, you'll know Fifth Avenue goes downtown. So I went from uptown to downtown on the Fifth Avenue bus, and I crossed over, and I see a whole flock of human blue jays coming towards me. And I realized these are girls in my class. And they were all running towards me. We wore a uniform. We had the white shirt and the blue jumper we wore at the time because we were small, so we wore blue jumpers. They were all running towards me. And I thought, in the time between them running towards me and meeting me on the street, I thought, you know what? Maybe today's going to be a good day. Maybe they're going to tell us that they found out that we have ice cream for lunch today, or maybe they're going to take us ice skating today. instead of tomorrow, because we always went ice skating once a week. Maybe we have a sub, because, kids always love to have a substitute teacher. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a good day. And then we got closer, and then they all stopped and looked at me, and they looked at each other because, you know, they had something to tell me. And finally, one of them said, or I think it was several of them in unison, said, Martin Luther King was killed last night. And I thought, wait, what? Is that the news? And why are they so excited to tell me this? And did they think I didn't know? I didn't say anything, but I went up to the classroom and I put my head on my desk and I cried for a while, to the point where the teacher came over and she said to me, Erica, honey, stop crying. Gave me a Kleenex, but I couldn't stop crying. And she said, you have to stop crying because you're upsetting the other girls. And I thought, wait, did she just say that? And I picked my head up and I said, if the only way the other girls are going to be upset about what happened is to see me cry, I'm going to need that whole box of tissues. And I went to put my head back down on my desk, but my head never got there because the teacher grabbed me by the arm. She had nails, dug her nails into my arm, pulled me up out of my seat, and took me to the headmistress's office. The headmistress said that I had been insubordinate and that I needed to write a letter of apology to this teacher for what I had said. You know what I thought in that moment? Oh, this is what my mother meant. When your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. And I thought, my hand is in this lion's mouth. What if I don't dance? What if I don't write this letter of apology? What will happen? Well, I suspected that I would be expelled. And further, worse, I suspected that no other Black girl would get this opportunity anytime soon. So I wrote the letter. I think I did what I had to do because I I thought, what would Dr. King want me to do? He would want me to think of the higher goal, not my own pride, you know, not my own experience of the injustice of this, but the higher goal. And the higher goal was to get this education. The higher goal was to create a situation where other girls could could come and get this education. So I wrote the letter of apology. And that's my memory of Martin Luther King, uh, his death. Um, but I wanted to say that, I was not just a random Black person who knew about Martin Luther King's work. Uh, our father had worked with him. Uh, he had gone to Albany, Georgia in 1962, and he had been trained in nonviolent resistance. And then they had protested. And we saw my father on the news that night. So 62, so 56, I'm 6 years old. So this is before Nightingale, before all of that. And Martin Luther King is what, 32, a year older than my own daughter is right now. And we saw on TV the dogs biting the protesters. We saw the water hoses, and we learned that my father had been put in jail with a bunch of other clergy. Now, I remember I have two little brothers, and they hear that their father is in jail, and they're shocked, horrified, devastated because, bad guys go to jail. And my mother explained, she said, sometimes there are good people who break bad laws and then they get put in jail. But your father's not a bad guy. Your father's a good guy. And he's with Dr. King and they're fighting for civil rights. So we knew who Dr. King was. And one of our prized possessions is a letter that Dr. King wrote to my father right here in 1962. So remember, he died in 68, right? This letter he wrote in 1962, the letterhead is from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, where Wyatt T. Walker was the executive director. And it's addressed to my father, and it's from Dr. King, and I'll read it. Dear Reverend Hageman, that's my maiden name. Yeah, my father was a white guy. What are you going to do? Dear Reverend Hageman, for several weeks I have intended writing to express my personal appreciation to you for your marvelous witness in Albany, but the accumulation of a flood of mail has stood in my way. The smoke is gradually clearing from the nonviolent battle at Albany, and we assess the results of our summer-long effort. As we assess the result of our summer-long effort, we all agree that one of the high points of the summer was the contribution rendered by our brothers from the North, who came to share with us in the fight against injustice. A nonviolent campaign towards social change is at least a year-long effort, and in the Deep South, probably longer. Albany is now in its 9th month. We have amassed a nationwide protest, and the world knows through Albany exactly what the Negroes' situation is in the South and the nature of their grievances. During the next few months, we will be working towards reconciliation, the first opportunity for which is the coming election on October 26th. We have been successful in adding another 2,000 voters to the rolls, so we are prepared. We now must depend on the moderate white community to join with us in creating an opportunity to establish a community of justice. Your witness certainly did much to raise the right moral and religious questions for them. Let us hope they have been sensitive enough to at least express an opinion for justice in the privacy of the voting booth. Your continued help and prayer will be greatly appreciated. You have now become sensitized to the problem in a new way. We're counting on you to discern some methods of action which contribute to our national problem in race relations. Our nation suffers when churches are burned, when mobs kill and ravish in protest of a single person of color being admitted to an institution of higher learning. Certainly, this is the responsibility of freedom-loving religious people everywhere. We thank you for being sensitive to these concerns and giving of yourselves that we may walk together as sons and daughters of God one day soon in these United States. I hope our paths will be crossing again in the not too distant future. I certainly will be keeping in touch with you. With warm personal regards, I'm sincerely yours, Martin Luther King. So this was 1962. He was young and he was hopeful and he was sincere in his request to the community of clergy that they join with him in this cause. So as you can imagine, by my desegregating that school, I really felt like I was contributing to the cause. And I used to say when I would take abuse from teachers or from parents of students whom I knew. I used to say, I'm doing this so one day when I have a little girl, she won't have to go through this. Because I thought that that's what it would take. I thought I would do this thing and others like me would do the same thing. And when I was an adult, um, we'd be good because I didn't understand. There's a refrain that people would say in crowds when King was there, how long? And he would say, not long. But there is chronos, time on the clock, and there's kairos, the fullness of time. And I think that for a lot of people who are disappointed about the results of the election, they didn't understand what the fullness of time means. They didn't understand that, yes, the moral arc may move towards justice, but it's not today, and it's probably not tomorrow. But you have to work as though it is. So I saw an editorial, and I thought it was really, really good by Michelle Norris. She's a senior contributing editor for MSNBC, and she speaks to this sort of convergence that we're experiencing today of these two events, the commemoration of Dr. King, and then this other event. And here's what she says. It is a cruel irony that the nation will commemorate the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the day a man is sworn in as president who swears he'll roll back diversity efforts. That Donald Trump is also promising to dispense even more tax breaks to the wealthiest, has appointed the least diverse and most questionably qualified slate of cabinet officials in recent memory, and has unapologetically accepted the embrace of white nationalists who proclaim him as a hero, makes the day feel like a surreal collision on the calendar. The fact that King's commemoration and Trump's inauguration coincide feels both off-brand and on point in a country where the trains of progress and backlash have always moved on parallel tracks. But in this case, the backlash feels like it has the momentum of a bullet train. On the other hand, the effort to help marginalized or underrepresented people gain ground seems like it's struggling not to roll backward down a steep and craggy hill. Dr. King talked passionately about these parallel tracks in his lifetime, so we shouldn't be surprised to find ourselves confronted with the same challenges in ours. In King's era, church bombings, televised beatings, and the notorious murders of civil rights workers and innocents like Emmett Till stirred a nation's conscience around racial reconciliation. In ours, COVID disparities, family separations at the border, and video of police violence against Black victims stoked an earnest conversation about equality in America. Corporations suddenly committed to social justice issues and pledged billions of dollars to help. But only a small fraction of the money pledged appears to have been spent. And many of those same businesses are now downsizing or devastating their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts because the incoming administration has essentially declared that DEI is DOA. Overwhelmingly, America is still struggling with the irresolution and contradictions King wrote in his 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? It has been sincere and even ardent in welcoming some change, he wrote. But too quickly, apathy and disinterest rise to the surface when the next logical steps are to be taken. Laws are passed in a crisis mode after a Birmingham or a Selma, but no substantial fervor survives the formal signing of legislation. The recording of the law in itself is treated as the reality of the reform. I pick up my dog-eared marked up copy of Where Do We Go From Here, King's final book, every year around this time, and it always offers fresh lessons. This is the book in which King allowed himself to be angry on the page. The book in which he lamented that integration alone wasn't the end goal if white America treated Black Americans and other people of color with decency instead of true opportunity. In which King focused not just on racial reconciliation, but on a broader human rights agenda that included fighting for the poor and for just wages for the working class Americans whose white modern day counterparts overwhelmingly voted for Trump. This book represents a Dr. King who was beginning to feel like America was turning a deaf ear to his pleas. He had won the Nobel Peace Prize, but had begun to lose support and respect from younger and more radical Black leaders. And some white politicians who'd been allies, people such as President Lyndon Johnson, were beginning to disdain his opposition to America's involvement in the Vietnam War. Because this was the king who was pointing out that the stark equation of racial disparity, seen in unemployment, infant mortality, and income opportunities, quote, pursues Negroes even into war, noting the disproportionately high casualty rate for Black soldiers in Vietnam. The king the reader encounters in the book's 200 pages is quite different from the man who's been portrayed since a federal holiday was established in his name. The holiday is now about as old as King was when he was assassinated on a balcony in Memphis. 2 years before he was assassinated, a Gallup poll found that 63% of Americans had negative views of King, and an FBI memo declared that he was, quote, the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation because of his influence over great masses of Negroes. The widespread acceptance of King as a certified American hero has come with a softening of his image after he was caricatured as a dreamer instead of a doer, and a soaring orator instead of a strategic and persistent agitator. He's been increasingly portrayed as someone who tried to appeal to the conscience of white Americans instead of someone who was increasingly pointing out white America's hypocrisies and inconsistencies of effort. As he wrote, white America was ready to demand that the Negro should be spared the lash or brutality and coarse degradation, but it had never been truly committed to helping him out of poverty, exploitation, or all forms of discrimination. He wrote that Negroes hold only one key to the double lock of peaceful change. The other is in the hands of the white community. He was a complex and evolving man who saw America's limitations as well as its possibilities, and often despaired that the chasm was so wide. And yet, his holiday is the day we get lectures about the content of our character from people who don't fully support the ideas and policies of the man they selectively quote. In the 4 decades of our nation, in the 4 decades our nation has been celebrating the King holiday, it feels that we focused only on slim aspects of a much broader legacy. The shades have been drawn over windows in his life that could serve as a lighthouse in this moment of tumult and uncertainty. And because we need that lighthouse right now, it might be useful to focus on his evolution toward dispelling hard truths despite the blowback. It might be smart to look back on the ways he tried to encourage people inside and outside the movement who felt like America would never live up to her promise, and reminded people that a final victory wouldn't come without constant setbacks. He said, with a dynamic will, we must transform our minus into a plus and move on aggressively through the storms of injustice and the jostling winds of daily handicaps toward the beginning lights of fulfillment. Our dilemma is serious and our handicaps are real, but equally is the power of a creative will and its ability to give us the courage to go on. This may provide neither balm nor inspiration for those who are dispirited by the direction of the country, and the bizarre coincidence of the king holidays falling on the day a man who wants to be treated like a king is inaugurated. I grew up surrounded by wise elders who chafed under the strictures of a racially unjust world the king gave his life trying to change. They figured out how to flourish despite the unrelenting headwinds of racial codes and outright discrimination, and their wisdom is ringing in my ears right now. How many times did I hear some version of, "There are no accidents, only lessons to be learned"? In that sense, today's collision on the calendar feels like a call to action, a message wrapped up in a metaphor, a reminder that the federal commemoration of Dr. King's life isn't merely a day off from work, school, or toil, but a day to press onward to the most important tasks before us. That vision you have of a positive future, speak of it, write about it, share your ideas about it, run toward it. And I just want to end by saying, my mother's injunction as she was combing my hair, when your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. As I said, my first lesson of that was when I had to write that letter of apology. And what was I apologizing for? For crying that Dr. King had been assassinated. I've since learned that there is a lion, that my hand will frequently be in its mouth, and that in every moment, I actually have a choice as to whether I run the other way, pull my hand out of the lion's mouth, change the music, change the dance I do, not dance, or let my hand get bitten off and see if it regenerates. I had a viewer yesterday write me a very long message. I only read half of it, a white viewer, saying how offended she was by my words and my work, that I'm rude and disrespectful, uh, and that she will unsubscribe. I didn't bother to respond. Uh, I just did the bibbity bobbity boo thing and hit that button because she is not the lion to me. I don't have to dance to her music. And I suggest as we all move forward in this work, in this world, in these times, that we stop being mad that things didn't turn out the way we thought they would because we pulled a lever, and that we uh, think long and hard about how willing we are to put our hands in the lion's mouths. Those of us here who are Black, I'm not talking to you because your hand's already in the lion's mouth and you've learned the same lessons that I've learned. But to my white viewers, uh, this we need lessons, right? And the fact that these two events coincide on this day is a lesson. It's a message. Are we in or are we out? We're in. Are you in or are you out? Um, we can rest when we're dead. Speaking of, I don't want to do what I've seen some people do. Uh, I want to let Dr. King rest, but I would like to call on any ancestors. That certainly would include Dr. King. Almost knocked over my black don't crack cup, which is full of coffee. I'd like to call in any ancestor, the ancestors uh, on whom we stand, um, and ask them if they have any words for us on this hard, hard day and beyond. And I'll let Spirit pick all the cards. I'll choose five. We have the tree, we have the star, we have the bear, we have the cross, and we have the dog. And I think the message is clear. I don't think I need to draw clarifiers. The moral arc does bend towards justice, but it's a long, long arc. The tree in Lenormand indicates a long time. I always say it's a black thing. It's a song. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. This won't last always, but that doesn't mean it ends tomorrow. It doesn't mean that it ends with one push of the lever. The moral arc bends towards justice, but it's long. This is the long haul. We work towards a better future. I thought that, I would do my thing when I was a little girl and desegregate that school and put up with everything I put up with having been there. And, life would be great for any child of mine. Well, here we are. I too am being reminded that the moral arc may very well bend towards justice, but it hasn't bent all the way there yet. In the fullness of time, however, it will. The bear, this is my card for 45, particularly when he is in his most narcissistic, which it kind of is always. So Lenormand does not have a lion card, but it has a bear. When your hand is in the bear's mouth, you have to dance to his music, my mother would say. And I would say, do you really? Do you really? What other ways are there that we can navigate our interactions with this bear that do not require dancing to his tune? Well, whatever ways we choose, there will be pain. This is a card of pain. There is no escaping pain. Part of why I've been so annoyed, and the person who I had to get rid of yesterday was speaking to my annoyance with other readers who have said, you know, there was going to be a miracle today, and Dark Brandon and Courageous Kamala were going to save the day, and she was going to be the next president. No, this is about. I mean, this is. I mean, why tell people what you want them to hear when you know it's not going to happen? I don't understand. You know, I mean, I understood when I was a little girl. I thought when I'm a grown-up lady, things will be better. Well, now I'm a grown-up lady and things are not better. So I get it. I understand. Everybody has to understand this. There is no, our hands will be bitten off because we will find them in the lion's mouth. Learn how to work with one hand. You might find another occasion when your other hand's got to go in the lion's mouth. Well, learn how to use your feet. There will be pain. There's no escaping that. But we end with the dog. If we think about how we can foster community in this struggle, the pain won't be as painful. My father was just one guy, but he went to Albany, Georgia, let himself get hosed and beaten and bitten and jailed because he was showing his solidarity. So, what ways can you do that? In what ways can you do that? That's the question. Um, the ancestors are calling upon us to sit with our hands in the lion's mouth, to refuse to do the dance that the lion requests of us. Um, Today is it's a weird day. Um, Darkness spends the night, but joy comes in the morning. It may not be tomorrow morning, And it may not be the day after that, but in the fullness of time, the work is worth the pain. So I wish you all a good Monday, um, a good week, and a good life full of good work. All right, take care.